Hi, my name is Marilyn Lam, Vice President of Sales at Image Quicks and PhotoLinks. Now, the COVID pandemic has affected everyone worldwide. And as school photography moves toward recovery, let's hear how some of our industry partners have used this challenging time to invest in the future. As an essential step in making sure your studio is ready to tackle what's next, it's executing on prudent and timely investments to ensure efficiency, quality, and scalability for long-term growth. As we reflect on 2020, certainly a year for the record books, finding the silver lining and how we use these difficult situations for opportunities to improve are important perspectives. I'd like to welcome our panelists today. Mike Norkin, CEO of Cherished Memories, Dave Stock, owner of Team DSP, and Scott Rogers, owner of Stuart Rogers Photography. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to ask everyone if you could just introduce yourself, give a little bit of a background about your studio and yourself and the marketplace that you're in. Scott, would you kick us off?
Sure. Scott Rogers. I own Stuart Rogers Photography in the Chicago area. We have 3 studios. Started in the 40s by actually my mother, and both my parents worked in it for a while. We've gone from portraits. It was kind of a high-end portrait studio and weddings at the beginning. They were the first really doing journalistic weddings in the 40s. Then had a school of photography for a while. Finally, when digital came, transitioned all of it to schools. So about 90% of our business is schools. Right when digital hit, I was like, this is not going to be good for the rest of my industry. So we made schools happen. So now we do basically rich kids at school.
Great. Thank you. All right, Dave.
Dave Stock. Name of our company is Team DSP. We're based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, just north of DFW Airport. We do almost exclusively team and individual sports for middle schools and high schools. I used to do a bunch of leagues, got tired of them, got tired of moms looking over my shoulders. And so we're doing mostly the school market. We're basically now a mom and pop without a mom. I figured out how to make this lean and mean. We do a whole lot of business considering basically it's me, like triple full-time and 1 employee, and we've trimmed it down, and I'll get back to that because that's largely been a response to the COVID situation. So
wonderful. Thank you, Dave. And Mike, tell us about yourself and Cherished Memories.
Hi, my name is Mike Norkin, and I'm the now CEO of Cherished Memories Photography. I started the company, this is my 20th year in business. Started it in my garage, and kind of like Stuart, I was in weddings and high-end portraits and was a Monty Zucker student and a cult member for a long time. And, Monty pushed me to get out of my comfort zone. And as soon as I finished my 3rd class with him, I ran into a high school who basically said to me, do you want us to send all 450 seniors to you because the photographer that we're using is not very good? And so that set me off into the volume world that I'm currently in now. And over the last 3 to 5 years, we've just kind of blown it up down here in Southern California, where we went from 5 to 6 schools to this year we're now at 80 and 140,000 heads. And lots of stuff on the horizon for us. We're just kind of taking them as they come.
A lot of growth. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So as we're starting, we're talking about COVID and making investments in this environment. And I'm going to ask each of you if you take a step back just a little bit to the beginning of 2020. So how was the year shaping up for you? This COVID hit around the end of the first quarter, give or take a little bit. So Scott, would you start us off?
Yeah, we've actually had one of the best years we've ever had. We've kind of threaded the needle through the shutdowns. So Chicago has had a lot of shutdowns this year. Our senior year was amazing. We just improvised. We shifted to, anyway, it's been a great year overall. We shifted to less people. We don't have to do the school candids because there's no school, so our cost structure's way down. And then we have that PPP money flowing into the bottom line. It's actually been an amazing year. That's why I'm sitting here on a boat this fall.
Well, thank you very much. Good to hear that. And we'll get into that a little bit further. And Dave, can you tell us how the beginning of the year started off for Team DSP?
He's got a boat. I've got a canoe with cobwebs on it. We were looking like we're going to be doing pretty good until this hit, and I had zero work from March on until August. I did have 1 month where I made $9. 1 month, the next month I made 27. So I like the shape of that curve. It just was started off with a kind of a low base. So we're doing sports. All of our sports were shut down. Everybody was locked, in their homes. And since we started up in August, in most of our schools in this area, they have not been allowed to have photography. They've not been allowed, even though we're doing virtual groups now, the decision makers are not aware in many cases of the fact that virtual groups can be safe. And as a result, we're at about a quarter of our normal volume right now. Although the good news for us is that I probably will have about 85% of my best year's profit because of other efficiencies I've identified in the way I've changed my business to respond to this. So we're surviving, but nowhere near the gross.
Well, we look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you, Dave. And Mike, how was the beginning of the year for Cherished Memories?
Well, my story is actually kind of similar to, I can take bits and pieces from both of Dave and Stuart here. So I think when we last saw you guys at SPAC, we were going gung-ho, and we had some new business opportunities that we were pursuing, and we came into February going, hey, 2020 could be a great year. Mm-hmm. And then I'll never forget, it was March 13th when the wise and great governor of the state of California came on television and told all of us that we were no longer allowed to be outside, and we were no longer allowed to make decisions for ourselves and shut our business down along with the rest of the state of California. And what that ended up doing is that laid off 16 people in my company and gave us that oh shit moment kind of deal. Mm-hmm. For the first couple of weeks, it was kind of fun. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. We get 2 weeks of vacation and we'll figure this out. And then as the experiment continued to go on, the fear factor started to set in that, wait a second, other states aren't necessarily doing this. And how do we get out of it? Because our schools panicked, freaked out, and by the time the end of March came, they had already canceled school for the rest of the year. And so at that point now we're like, okay, what the hell does this mean? So with all of our with all of our employees, we went ahead and paid them as far as we could, because I just didn't think it was fair to them that the world that we were in, they were going to get caught up in. And so I wrote some fairly large checks, and I had 4 days prior to the lockdown had just invested heavily into a new office. And boy, could I have used that $35,000 back real quick. And by the time we got to the beginning of April, the world came crashing down and didn't know where we were going from there. But like Stuart, I can tell you we've had a record year. COVID has allowed us to identify a lot of amazing, wonderful new ways of doing things. Our partnership with you guys has allowed us to do a lot of amazing and wonderful things. And, it's really weird to say, and maybe you two, Dave and Stuart, can also agree with the statement. We've had Dave said you mentioned 85% of your best year through this, and Stuart, you're talking about an amazing senior year. It's kind of weird to say we've had an amazing year through a pandemic where so much has changed and so many crazy things have happened. But without the pandemic, I don't think that we double in size in 4 months, and I don't think we do all the crazy stuff that we've been able to do. So it's been a blessing in disguise, and we just have had to figure it out, which we have.
Well, thank you, Mike. And it's Scott from Stuart Rogers.
Scott, sorry.
Okay. That's okay. My middle name, so it's fine. I'll go by.
That's what happens when you get me at 7 a.m.
Absolutely. Well, kind of leaning into the question then, what impact did COVID-19 have on your business, and what investments did you make to ensure not only survival, but future growth? Mike, I know you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned that I think it was April 5th was a monumental day for Cherished Memories. Can you kind of expand on that?
Yeah, April 5th was the day that I woke up to Wells Fargo telling me I had no more money. And literally we had tapped out everything, and we were $3,500 negative. And when I say that, that wasn't just my business, that was my personal, that was everything, because we had liquidated everything to take care of our people, because we didn't think that this was going to be 5, 6, 10, 12, and 8 months later. We thought that this was a couple weeks long and we would get back to it. We had I literally had $120,000 worth of business booked for the month of March. And on top of that, April was also that way. So I figured if I spent it all, I'd get it all back. Well, April 5th came around and no longer could I pay to take my kids to McDonald's, and I couldn't do anything. And the realization hit that if this continues to go on, that this pandemic wasn't just going to cost people's lives, it was going to cost our business our life. And so we had to sit down, and I pulled the brain trust of our company together, and that next Monday, because April 5th was a Sunday, I believe. And we sat amongst each other with some tears in our eyes and just said, look, there's no way in hell we're letting this kill us. So what do we need to do to figure this out? And that's where we realized we were not using our resources appropriately. We weren't marketing in the way that we needed to. We were obviously inefficient in a lot of ways. We weren't deploying our staff the way that we needed to. And over the course of 45 days, we realized that we could turn left when we wanted to. We could turn right when we wanted to. We didn't always have to go this direction just because that's what we've always done. And so when a customer would call us and they would tell it or ask us, can you do this? Without me ever even doing the project before, yes, we can do that. Give me some time, we'll figure it out. And we did. And so we became a sign printer. We became a banner printer. We became a products printer, and whatever high school senior parents wanted, because they were the ones feeling the brunt of the closure, we became the provider of that. And what the cool thing was, all of our schools said, it was kind of like the government 10 years ago saying that our car dealerships were too big to fail. Our school districts basically said, we weren't too big to fail, but they realized that we were in a position to fail, but they didn't want to move on without us. And so they said whatever they could send our way, they did. So we would get a phone call almost daily from one of our school districts and say, can you make this? Can you do that? Can we pay you to do this? Can you make our, we actually ended up doing a video for the virtual graduation for 4 high schools, which was 2 hours long and was absolutely amazing. We killed it. And we were able to survive, and that springboarded us into where we are today. And because we answered our phone, and because we answered our emails, and we had words of encouragement on our Facebook pages, and we were out in the community saying, hey, let's fight this and let's continue. Schools from all over Southern California saw that, unlike, the dark side, who said we're literally closed until July, we said we are open every day and twice on Sundays to answer your call. What do you need? And because of that, schools appreciated that aspect and realized that, hey, we were right in their backyard. They didn't have to call the national big boy to try and figure it out. They had a guy on the ground who was willing to do it. And that, again, is we went from 11 comprehensive high schools in March to 30 today. And that's huge. And the largest high school in the state of California is included in that, with 5,500 students. So that to me was, and that was in March, I never would have guessed that was even a possibility. So for us, it's just been amazing. It's been crazy, scary.
Significant growth there. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And Dave, I know that we talked a few weeks ago and you mentioned rebooting in the time of COVID, that you had to reboot your business. How did it impact you, and what kind of investments did you put in place?
Well, I saw back in March that obviously things are going to be different, and assuming we'd be working again in August, that I would have to figure out how to do what we've always done with far fewer people. Most of my people were part-time college students who, in almost every case, had to drop out of school and go back and live with their families in other parts of the state or the country. So all of a sudden, I kind of lost my staff, and I thought, the key to this is going to be, instead of a larger company with 10 people at a photo shoot to do a big football shoot, I had to figure out how to be more like a commando, kind of, to be able to drop in a guerrilla photographer. I could see that we were going to have people canceling at the last minute because they were being quarantined. I would have people at the last minute saying, hey, can you come in Wednesday? We're all healthy all of a sudden. And so how could I respond quickly? And what it meant was getting away from paper order forms, doing everything online, which I had been wanting to do for years, but hadn't fully committed to. And that's where Blueprint came in. I had to figure out a different workflow. Our biggest football team, on the varsity team, we got 130 kids in a photo. Used to take us 9 people to have people signing people and then taking money and making change and posing kids and everything. We did that with 2 people in 30 minutes this year. Because of a new workflow. So all green screen, virtual groups. And one of the big changes there is I've I mean, I love Micro Four Thirds cameras, and for everything we've done, they've been great up to this point. But I figured out that if I could shoot a kid holding the ball, and then they can flip the ball to the next kid in line, rotate towards me, put their arms behind their back, and I could do a full body shot. I now had everything I needed to build their headshots, their position group photos, their senior group photo, their varsity group photo, and the individual prints for the parents. The key there, though, is I had to zoom in on a full body shot just on the upper body and pull out a very high quality headshot that would be 5x7 by 300 DPI. And so I invested in Lumix S1R cameras and lenses, which is our new full frame system, which gave me a much bigger file and allowed me to use that image for multiple things and have the pixels I needed to do it. So the reinvestment was in your software, and the full frame system, and a bunch of green flooring to put down underneath your feet.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. And Scott, the same question to you. What investments did you make in your business? I know when we talked back in February, March, you were reevaluating some of your operating processes.
Yeah, we've always had our own lab from the chemical days until this year. And my partner and I, actually, we went through huge expansion several years ago and went all over the Chicago market. And then we looked at each other and were really frustrated with our lives. And at that point, did a P&L on every school. So we almost tripled our volume, and weren't making any more money. So we did a P&L on all our schools and actually dumped about 60% of our accounts. This is about 2 years ago. Took only the ones that were making money. So unfortunately, we are all only rich kids now, but that's where the money is. Last year, the year before last, we put in a new lab facility. And then with COVID, we said, this is an amazing opportunity. We also had a legacy software system that was really amazing, but built on servers in the basement. And so we said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity now to change all that, which we did. And actually, we never could have done it without COVID happening, because the growing pains and change pains were
because you would have been busy to handle it at that time, right?
Yeah. I mean, if we were doing it at full volume and trying to switch this whole system over, we would have been a mess. So we did. We switched it all. It was a little stressful for everybody, but in the end, my cost of goods is lower than it was a little bit. And I assume Richmond and Blueprint are making some money off me even at that. And it's been amazing. My staff, I just have so many fewer staff. It's hard in Illinois to do business because everything is so expensive, and the insurances and everything is just crazy. And the minimum wages are going up and up and up. And we knew we had to do something, and this was just an opportunity. So now I hardly have anybody working in the office anymore. Everybody's at home, which is also thanks to Blueprint. So I have, a couple people in the office to very few. And our senior workflow is the same thing. No more receptionists, no more anything. And what COVID allowed on that is when people were, everybody understood. We said, well, we can't have a receptionist here. So you just deal with it. And they were, okay, we get it.
A lot of efficiencies. That's great. Thank you very much. And Scott, what is one investment you wish you would have made sooner, and why?
Well, I think shutting down the lab was actually the biggest one. Just so much easier without the Noritsu. We had all Noritsu machines from the chemical days again, and they're quirky and they break down all the time, and the service guys are in all the time, and people hiring people to stand around and put pictures in envelopes when I assume that Richmond has a machine doing that. It was just it's not. Maybe it was cost effective at one point, but I don't feel like it is anymore. I don't miss the lab at all.
At all.
I sold my Noritsus for close to nothing and was smiling when they went out the door.
Oh. Thank you. Same question to you, Dave. Is there anything that you wish you would have invested in sooner? And why?
I've known for years that I wasn't happy with the software I was using, which was a Darkroom, previously known as Express Digital. And so I tried an experiment last year with another lab and another piece of proprietary software that didn't work out as well as I hoped. And for me, it was like some of these other guys. There's changes you want to make. It takes time to make the decision. You don't want to change over when you're doing high volume. And we've been blessed until COVID to be so busy that I never had time to work on a website, which you'll understand when you see a website, or do marketing, or make strategic changes, because we were doing okay and I was filling orders. But we had a bunch of time off, and that gave me a time to say, okay, now's the time to go and try some new software, learn some new software, see if it's going to work for me. And I've been very pleased because Blueprint has allowed me to change so much of what we're doing, and so many of the problems I used to have disappeared, and I've barely even scratched the surface of what the software can do. It's very robust, and I haven't even tapped into the marketing end of it. So at some point I'll be bothering my rep there and having him help me make more money. But it's been a really good thing, and I want to publicly thank Mike Norkin, because he was a big part of that decision. Mike talked me off the ledge last year when we were on a ledge overlooking Hoover Dam, and told me
we were literally on a ledge.
Yeah, I wasn't going to jump, but we were on a ledge. So anyway, it's been really good. So being able to work with Richmond and get them the product through Blueprint has all made my life a lot easier.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, I think it's that saying, like, you evolve or you repeat. And so it sounds like you've definitely evolved. So appreciate that. And Mike, same question to you. Is there anything you wish you would have invested in sooner, and why?
Yeah, lots of different things, but I'll try and focus on one or two of them here. But the cool thing is, what I like, and I didn't realize, we're all Richmond users and we're all Blueprint users, which is pretty cool. And I think that combination is pretty key, because what you're talking about now is the ability to be fully automated. You're talking about having your marketing and your messaging go out clearly and concisely, and you're having people order. And this was something that I never took advantage of. I've been, I think, an ImageQuick's customer for 8 or 9 years. And until about 1.5 to 2 years ago that I really understood the value of email and text message marketing. And April and May, we really kicked it into high gear with some begging and groveling from my side to learn what that meant, to get my staff to embrace it and come up with some concepts. And then you guys helped us to deploy it. And then we started seeing orders not come in slowly, but come in. I mean, at one point, our senior orders were coming in at almost 30 an hour, which was roughly $2,000 an hour at one point when it was really busy in the spring. And to watch that happen was incredible. And to know that for 8 years prior to that, I hadn't taken advantage of that, and I hadn't asked you to help me figure that out, was just, I was kicking myself. Like, all the money that I left on the table for not doing this, what the hell was I doing? And ultimately, as you're talking and listening to what both of these other gentlemen are saying, and this is the mantra that I've tried to give to some of my peers, so often we are stuck in the weeds doing the photo taking and the printing and the sorting and all the basic stuff. We fail to take that 30,000 foot level view of our company and really understand where a company needs to go. And what COVID has allowed me to do is take that huge step back, like you're hearing from Dave and Scott. I finally got your name right. And it allowed me to identify exactly where my staff needed to be. So I didn't need, again, all the people in my office either. So I have 3 people at home answering the phones. I have people answering emails. I have actual division people handling certain things, because I used to do all of that myself. And now I have an opportunity to look at my company globally, figure out where sales are leaking, figure out where we need to push another marketing campaign, and do those things that I never got to before. So the investment was in proper people and workflow. So that way we were not, I mean, literally my staff tells me now in the office, they used to receive everything from Richmond, then have to sort it out, put it in their own folders. Everything's being shipped home. That is probably the biggest difference for our studio right now. Everything goes directly home. My staff says they're bored to death at the office now because they don't have anything to do besides just customer service, which, it's great, but they're like, that only lasts, 27 of the 60 minutes an hour, because the rest of the time they're in back taking pictures. So we've had to they're now focused on sales and lead generation while they're not working with people. So that whole fundamental shift is, you order on Monday, the lab prints it by Wednesday, and the customer has it by Saturday or the following Monday. We never were able to implement that a year ago. And the fact that we can do that, and the fact that we can be in different parts of the world and still be on Blueprint. So I have 5 studios. I just bought one in Phoenix. I'm probably going to be opening one in San Diego soon. And I'm going to be 100 miles away and 350 miles from another. And I'll be able to run my entire business from my home, because I have a connected software that allows me to see and interact everywhere, and allows all of my staff to do the same thing. And that's really the biggest difference. embracing all of the new technology that you guys are offering, deploying it in a way that is useful for our company. And I just wish, one, that Blueprint was out about 5, 7, or 10 years ago, and two, I had figured it out then too, because it would have saved all these gray hairs. Wouldn't be here if I had figured this stuff out a long time ago. So I blame Jordan. It's Jordan's fault.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for sharing that, and everyone. And so, kind of in concluding today's discussion, I wanted to ask just one last question from each of you. And that is, what advice do you have for other studios as they think about adapting their business in these changing times? Scott?
I guess it would just be to be flexible and open-minded about the solutions out there. Trust your instincts, I think, on what the answer is, and focus on the bottom line for us. It's like we were, as I said, we were so focused on growth for so long, and then we looked at bottom lines on these, and we're like, oh my God, one of our biggest realizations was that the lower the income demographic, I mean, when we're picking schools now, we just look it up on Zillow and see what the average house, and the lower the income demographic, the more the schools want free from us, and the higher the income demographic, the higher the orders, and they want nothing from us except happy families. There are some of the best schools that we have. We have absolutely no service work for. They just want us to they know we'll take care of their people. And
that's great advice.
Just moving, don't be afraid to take risks and make changes.
More strategic, exactly. Yes, absolutely. And how about you, Dave?
Well, I think that when you've had some degree of success, as all three of us have had, all four of us actually, in different realms, it's easy to assume that your successes are a direct result of the decisions you made. And that's not actually right. Some of the decisions we make suck. We don't know it until later. Sometimes we never know it. Some of the decisions we make are brilliant and no one else can appreciate it, just us. But like when I start one of my talks in front of a group, I tell them, I'm going to try my best to give you good advice. 100% of what I tell you I believe in, 10 or 15% of it's stupid. And I'll know that next year, and then I'll apologize for that. So it's easy to get in ruts. And what COVID did for all of us, I think, is it forced us out of our ruts. It wasn't free will that allowed us to make some changes. In many cases, we had no choice. And we had the time to do things, and we had to roll the dice and say, does it work? I can give you an example from my world. I mean, for the longest time, I resisted doing virtual groups, and I had a lot of great reasons for that. And I found out that so many of my core concerns about that I knew were right were wrong, totally wrong. I had yet to have a single coach call me and say they wanted me to change who was in a composite group and reprint the group. I thought that would be a real problem. They move kids up and down off varsity. They'd want me to reprint their projects. Never happened. So now watch, it'll happen tomorrow because I just cursed it.
Hopefully not.
In general, Mike's talking about how for 10 years he didn't take advantage of marketing afterwards with email or whatever. We all got stories like that, and we can beat ourselves up over all the money we could have made. But we just got to remember that we're doing okay, but we always got to do better. We never have all the answers. And just rethink all of your assumptions, especially since all of us are relatively old. You got to try to think like one of these young guys or gals and realize that some of their ideas are actually okay for their relative youth and listen. So it's be humble and always be willing to admit that you don't have all the answers.
That's good perspective. Thank you very much. And Mike, how about from your viewpoint?
That's great perspective, Dave. And I agree. Our word of the year is flexible. So again, as you guys have collected, I mean, these two guys, I just met Scott here for the very first time, and I've had the luxury of knowing Dave for about a year. But it's really cool to hear the two of them because it's literally you're pulling ideas right out of my head too. We believe in the exact same stuff. The phrase that I would say here is don't step over pennies. I mean, don't step over dollars to chase pennies, and that was really something that I did for a very long time. I was too afraid to spend money. I was too afraid to do things. I was too afraid to hire or pay people what they really needed to pay. And so I was constantly backfilling them when they left and found another job somewhere else. Lots of different things. And I realize now that spending some money up front today pays dividends later. And so having the right tools, having the right people in place to do what you need them to do, having the right partners such as ImageQuicks, Richmond, both of them, they had my back when I needed them. They were there for me when I called and said, this is what I need. They stepped up to the plate and hit a home run for me. Finding people that, paying people minimum wage doesn't always work. And so now we find ourselves paying almost double minimum wage on average across the board. And guess what? I was afraid of that huge dollar amount and all the taxes I was going to have to pay here in the state of California, because Lord knows that they're going to come after everything I have. But on the same token, having quality people who are invested in my company, who believe in what we do, who appreciate being treated and paid a fair and honest wage, they would jump on a grenade if I asked them to, because that's what they would do. They love their job. And, for the longest time, I'm like, look, I could have just paid you $5 more an hour and I could get $25 more an hour worth of productivity. I had no idea that I would see such great results from it. And so what I hear from my peers is they're so afraid to spend money. And so my advice to them is, don't step over dollars to save pennies or to chase pennies. It's not worth it. I think each of these guys up here would tell you at some point in their careers, they did the same thing and they probably got to that same realization as I did. And you're right, Dave. I never would have done some of these things if COVID hadn't hit. I didn't have a choice. I went kicking and screaming, but we are 100% online. We are 100%. Nothing is being handed to anyone. You have to go online to place your order, and it goes directly to the lab without any staff intervention now. And guess what? It is the best decision we ever made. And anyone who wants to really grow their business, I think you would be foolish not to consider a workflow process that didn't include that that part is your main thing. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you for great advice, definitely. Well, thank you everyone for your time you spent with us today. There's a lot of excellent information and good nuggets we're able to get out of this about investing in your studios and helping prepare for the future, whatever that may throw at us. So Mike, Dave, and Scott, thank you for being part of today's panel discussion. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for the time you spent with us today. There's a lot of excellent information and good nuggets we're able to get out of this about investing in your studio and helping prepare for the future, whatever that may throw at us. So Mike, Dave, and Scott, thank you for being part of today's panel discussion. We really appreciate it.